From the media, good afternoon. Welcome to the State Council's Joint Mechanism press conference. With the intensification of the efforts, the adequate supply of the daily necessities becomes more and more important. So today, the theme of the press conference is the supply of the daily necessities. And we have with us Mr. Chen Da from NDRC, Mr. Yang Lisheng from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas. He's in charge of the crop farming, and Mr. Kong Liang also from the same ministry, but he's responsible for animal husbandry and veterinary. They will talk about the market. They will talk about the supply aspect to ensure the stable operation of the market. And also, we will have Dr. Fondue Zhao from CDC continuing the efforts to talk about the disease. Now, let me give you some updates. Yesterday, from the 31 provinces and the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corp, there are newly increased confirmed cases, 2656, severe cases, 87, with 52 from Hubei, death cases 89, 81 from Hubei, 2 from Henan, Hebei, Heilongjiang, Anhui, Shandong, Hunan, and Guangxi, 1 case respectively, and suspected cases 3916 with 2067 from Hubei. For newly increased cured and discharged cases, 600. Among which 324 from Hubei, and 31124 people or close contacts are removed from medical observation. So by the end of yesterday, based on the report from the 31 provinces and the Xinjiang Construction and Production Corp, there are now 33738 cases confirmed, with 6188 severe cases, 2649 cases of cured and discharged, 811 death cases, and 37198 confirmed cases. For suspected cases, 28942. Altogether, 371905 close contacts traced, and 188 under medical observation. From Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan regions, we altogether 53 cases, 26 from Hong Kong SAR, 1 death, 10 from Macau, 1 cured and discharged, and 17 from Taiwan, 1 cured and discharged. And now we have a reduction of 42.8% for the newly increased cases. That means that the joint control mechanism is having the impact or having the result. So that's all for the updates. And in recent days, with the guidance from the State Council, all the society have been mobilized. Yesterday, it was the Lantern Festival, one of the traditional Chinese festivals, and more than 1,000 medical professionals from Dalian and Jingzhou went to Wuhan to support the Leishenshan Hospital. Altogether, the NHC has already dispatched more than 11,000 medical professionals to Wuhan. And here we would like to pay our tribute and respect to the medical professionals. They have worked around the clock to save lives and cure the patients. With their dedication and devotion, we are confident that we will win this battle against the epidemic. We also call on the society to show care to these medical professionals. Now we will have the press conference. So we will have Mr. Chen Da from NDRC to give us some briefing. Good afternoon, friends from the media. According to the arrangement of the State Council Joint Mechanism, led by the Ministry of Commerce and supported by all the relevant ministries, the material supply team has already been in operation, and for days we have already strengthened our coordination with the Hubei local government, and in the key areas like Wuhan, we made every effort to ensure the supply of vegetable, staple food, edible oil, and other daily necessities. We have focused on 3 aspects. First, we try to coordinate the supply and demand. For the major wholesale markets, supermarkets, we have the daily reporting system identifying the potential risks and dealing with the problems. For example, on January the 26th, we found there was a supply shortage of vegetable in Wuhan. Then we took urgent action and coordinated with Shandong to have the vegetables sent to Wuhan. Also, we had put in place the mechanism in order to ensure the adequate supply of the daily necessities. For example, in Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai, we have already arranged 10,000 tons of pork meat from the central reserve system, and in recent days, we have already dispatched, and we are planning to dispatch more to Wuhan. Also, we try to ensure the lifeline. We have established the green channel for fresh and agricultural products. So, we have also addressed the block of the supply the incidents happened in Yunnan province. Also, we adopted 6 measures. First, to launch the price monitoring mechanism and dealing with the problems. Second, to increase the supply of the daily necessities and important materials. Third, to guide the local governments to increase the stockpiling. And the fourth is to offer more financial support. Together with the relevant authorities and administrations, for companies who are producing the key materials, they are enjoying policy support. Based on the recent data, on February the 8th, among the 36 major cities in China, the prices of the daily necessities are quite stable. Pork is getting stable, and vegetable is having some drop. And we can see that throughout the country and also Wuhan, it is fair to say that the supply is adequate and the price is, in general, stable. We will continue such monitoring and address the supply and demand gap as early as possible in order to ensure the daily lives of the people. Okay, now Mr. Yang Lisheng. Dear friends from the media, good afternoon. At the moment, the whole society is watching very closely the price of vegetables. So let me talk about the production of vegetable. Since the winter last year, throughout the country, vegetable production has been increased, and the overall supply is adequate.
The major specialties of vegetables in both northern and southern China have seen increase in their produce. There is sufficient supply. When we look at the entire national condition, we now have 8,000 84 million mu of vegetables, 2% higher than the same period of last year. In February, the temperature is higher than that of last year. It is good weather for promoting the produce of vegetables. The southern vegetables are now transported to northern cities. 7 southern provinces are helping 3 northern provinces. And among these 10 provinces, the current production acreage is higher than that of last year. So if we look at the produce of vegetables, the situation is great. The supply is sufficient, and the importance is to ensure the linchpins are well functioning. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Kong Liang from the Animal Husbandry and Veterinary Department of MOA. Milk, meat, and eggs are daily necessities for the general public in 2019, apart from a slight decline in the production of pork. In other parts of the supply, there has been some slight increase. For example, the beef and lamb 3.2% and milk 5.1%. We are accelerating the recovery of produce after the outbreak of NCP. Because of the road blockage and the suspension of production, there have been major pressure on the supply. Ministry of Agriculture has been in coordination with other departments to restore the order in supply. Great achievements have been scored. We've made the following efforts. First, we have been monitoring the supply on the market, stabilize production in different farming households. We've also been collaborating with the Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Public Security to ensure localities can put in place good order of supply and transportation. The feed manufacturers have restored their facilities and production. We've also opened hotline services to address the major concerns of the general public. We've received many frequently asked questions from the general public, and in response, we help the local governments to address those issues. For the next steps, we will try all the means to ensure the supply in the animal husbandry aspect. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Wang Bin from the Ministry of Commerce Market Operation Department to give you an introduction. Friends of the media, the Ministry of Commerce has been implementing earnestly the remarks from President Xi Jinping, and we have been implementing the deployment of the State Council to ensure the smooth supply of daily necessities. We have provided a statement of introduction for this press conference, so I will not read the statement word by word, but I'd like to take this valuable time slot to highlight 3 points. First, in Hubei province and the city of Wuhan, how daily necessities are supplied. For several days, there has been smooth order in the daily necessity supply in Hubei province. The prices have dropped to a normal level. Rice, noodles, edible oil, poultry, meat, milk, stock can ensure 10 to 15 days of supply. Pork, eggs supply can ensure a supply of 5 to 10 days. And vegetables can be supplied on 3 days in dynamic fashion. When you hear the number 3 days, 5 days, you don't have to be concerned because it is on a dynamic fashion. Each day there are stocks flying off the shelves, and each day there are also stocks flying onto the shelves. In recent days, there has been major improvement in the supply of these daily necessities in the city of Wuhan. On the 7th of February, vegetable transaction volume reached 3,000 tons in two wholesale vegetable markets, in particular Shijimei market. 70% of the vendors have restored their business. And in 3 major shopping malls, the supply can sustain a 10 days need. Some major enterprises' stock and inventory can provide frozen meat for a duration of 40 days. The Wuhan municipal government has been on the track of rediscovering the businesses on these vegetable and food markets. By the 8th of February, 14 outdoor open markets have restored their businesses, and the vendors sell potatoes, radish, onions that can be stored for a longer time. They also sell fresh vegetables like the Chinese leaves that are very much liked by the local citizens. Most of the vegetables come from Baishazhou, Sijimei wholesale markets, where they have relocated resources from across the country. The fresh leaves and the vegetables are now transported by the vendors, and they are taken from the farming households on the outskirts of Wuhan. These are open outdoor markets. There is spacious space on these markets, and you don't have to queue up to get the vegetables. So such markets are very much liked by the local citizens. Some supermarkets are also exploring a way for pre-order. Like citizens can use WeChat to make pre-order, and on the next day they can go to the shopping malls to collect their pre-ordered vegetables. And this measure has reduced the density of people on the markets and also has alleviated the inventory burden of the businesses. Second, I'd like to highlight the daily necessity supply on the national market after the outbreak of NCP. The general public is very much concerned about the supply of daily necessities, and there has been some sporadic increase in the supply. And also during the Spring Festival time, because of the suspension of businesses and also the suspension of logistics services. In the previous days, there have been some sporadic shortage and panic buying in some cities. In retail, along the retail chains, grain, edible oil, instant noodles were under short supply in some cities. Ministry of Commerce have been collaborating with many departments to guide the retail enterprises to reallocate resources and replenish the stocks, and guided the consumers to consume reasonably. So such shortages have been addressed. Across the country, there has been sufficient supply of daily necessities and the prices have been kept stable. Ministry of Agriculture colleagues have also assured us of a sustained production potential. The edible oil price has been kept stable. There is no major change to the meat price. There has been some slight decrease to the price of pork, and there has been slight decrease to the prices of fruits. During the Lantern Festival, the supermarkets have replenished their stocks, and there has been major increase of the seasonal food. In some cities and at certain time, for certain species of specialties of the products there may be a short span of a shortage, like the hand sanitizers or the supply of certain food types. We are faced with a very grim, challenging environment, and there has been major increase in the cost. And the panic buying still exists in certain places, and the market supply can be hardly restored to a normal level.
Therefore, we are trying to address the problem as early as possible, and we also wish to get the understanding from the consumers, especially the specific obstacles or difficulties faced by the logistics supply companies. Now, the future efforts mainly four aspects. First, to ensure the supply for the key areas. We will continue to bring into play the joint control mechanism across the 9 provinces and municipalities and ensure the supply of the daily necessities. For key areas, there would be more guidance concerning the supply of the daily necessities, and also get ready for the emergency coordination. The relevant administrations would be coordinated to address the outstanding problems and shortages and ensure the sales of the vegetables and the daily necessities. Also, with more people going back to work, we will try to ensure the adequate supply of the daily necessities. Second, to offer guidance to the enterprises to start their business. For enterprises with available conditions, and we will try our best to ensure the basic needs of the people. Thirdly, we will continue to import the commodities in short supply, like pork, and for the urgently needed protective devices like masks, we will expand the import. Also, we will continue to strengthen the market monitoring. That's all. Thank you. Now we will have the Q&A. Please identify yourself before you ask questions. The first question. The journalist on the first row. I'm from CCTV. My question is for Mr. Wang. Just now you mentioned that the supply of the daily necessities, as more people are returning back to work, I would say that there will be increasing need in the major cities. How are you going to ensure the supply of the daily necessities? Well, for this question, I'll first give the floor to Mr. Chen from NDRC and Mr. Yang from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Areas, and then Mr. Wang. Okay, just as you have rightly observed, every year when people returning back to work, the need for the daily necessities and also the food will increase. And this year, because of the epidemic, the pressure is even stronger. Therefore, NDRC, together with the Ministry of Commerce and the relevant ministries, is going to emphasize efforts particularly in 3 aspects. The first is to have real-time monitoring and strengthen the monitoring, the frequency, as well as the intensity. For any potential problems, we will try our best to identify them as early as possible and address them at an earliest date. Second, to ensure the supply of the daily necessities when conditions are available, enterprises producing the daily necessities will be supported to restart their operations. Also, offer more available resources and to ensure the coordination among the localities. Thirdly, we will continue to strengthen the adjustment capacity. In this regard, the local governments will be guided to provide more support to the major producers in their localities to ensure the production, and also for varieties with a shortage, the local governments will be guided to increase the stockpiling. As for the transportation, we will urge the implementation of the guidance and ensure the smooth transportation of the materials. Recently, the relevant government agencies have worked out rules and requirements to ensure the smooth transportation of the materials. Also, the first mileage project will be initiated in the rural areas, and the last mile project would be initiated in urban areas to ensure the smooth transportation of the materials and daily necessities. Mr. Yang, please. Every year, after the Spring Festival holiday, the migrant population and the students are returning back to the cities. I think it is fair to say that the major cities are quite experienced with dealing with such issues. And this year, the pressure is larger. And for vegetables, the transportation and also the production will be the priority. Furthermore, we will have the following priorities. First, to strengthen monitoring and guidance. Recently, the Ministry of Agriculture and the Rural Areas, together with the relevant government agencies, has worked out guidance to ensure the production and adequate supply. And we urge the localities to honor the duties in the Veg Basket project. At the same time, we have an expert panel offering technical guidance to the localities to reduce the harm done by the epidemic and ensure the supply. In Liaoning province, we can see that there is an increase of 108,000 acreage there mu, and also there are such increase of vegetable production in different localities. According to statistics, in the south part of the country, there is still a potential to increase the production of vegetable by 8 million mu. Also, the production of vegetables in both the north and the south, namely the greenhouse vegetables and the outdoor vegetables, are being increased. Also, there's a mechanism to match the demand and supply of vegetables between Wuhan and Guangxi Autonomous Region. Recently, with more people coming back to their work, we will pay particular attention to the major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, ensuring the adequate supply.
Third, we have stepped up implementation. We reported difficulties in transportation and the closing of certain markets, the shortage of supply of feeds to relevant departments, in particular NDRC. We promoted the funding supply. 200 million RMB has been allocated and earmarked for the easing of difficulty in transportation of the vegetable supplies. And we've stepped up relevant policies to restore animal husbandry operation. And fourth, we leveraged the mechanism of socialism society. We've organized the feed, vegetable, and milk associations to make market service, observe the situations, propose suggestions, promoted counterpart assistance to ensure the entire industry smooth running. For the next steps, I have given very brief highlights on Ministry of Commerce's plan. I'd like to make some additional remarks and the leadership of the Joint Prevention and Control Mechanism of the State Council. Departments and ministries have been coordinating to address transportation issues and the understaffing issue. Our common consensus is that produce and production have to be restored and businesses should be opened. After the outbreak of the NCP, Ministry of Commerce has been prepared for the abrupt demand increase because of the ending of the Spring Festival when people are going back to their workplaces. We've identified 500 key businesses, including 400 manufacturers and 50 wholesale markets and 20 backbone franchised companies, 10 e-commerce businesses, and restaurants, major restaurants. So altogether, 500 key businesses have been on the list of survey. We know the allocatable amounts, in particular, the list of meat, milk, eggs, grain, and edible oil. According to the initial calculus, there is 4 million tons that can be allocated. In case of urgency in any province, we can organize relevant departments to emergently allocate resources from this 4 million ton in stock. Of course, we lean on provinces to ensure their daily necessity supply, and this 4 million ton inventory is for emergency response. Journalist on the left. Thank you. I'm from Economic Daily. After the outbreak of NCP, the manufacturers of protective masks and garments have quickly recovered businesses, but for other businesses, the recovery of business has been slow, which may put a dent on the overall market supply. So what is the deployment plan? I'd like to ask Mr. Chen Da from NDRC and Mr. Wang Bin from Ministry of Commerce to take the questions. The recovery of business and manufacturing play a major role to ensure the smooth running of market according to the leadership principle of the Joint Prevention Control Mechanism. NDRC has been collaborating with departments, ministries, and localities to organize orderly restoration of production to ensure medical supplies and the supply of daily necessities. Apart from Hubei province, in the 30 provinces, in the rest of 30 provinces, there is a deployment plan of business restoration. By 7th February, masks manufacturers capacity restored, is over 73%, and the manufacturers and the producers of green products, 94.6% of the manufacturing capacity has been restored. The supply of natural gas and the supply from the transportation network are all put back in normal order. For the next steps, again, under the Joint Prevention Control Mechanism of the State Council, NDRC will collaborate with other departments and ministries to address the proper balance between epidemic prevention control and the insurance of supplies. We will ensure the manpower, the supply of raw materials, and we will also ensure the protection of the staff who have restored their production and their work. Employees from businesses should go back to their workplaces according to an arranged schedule. Holistic arrangements should be deployed by different provinces so that the rush hour of coming back to workplaces does not come at a single time slot. The supplies of the daily necessities and other priority areas must be ensured. Second, we will promote the entire supply chain smooth running. The key businesses are restoring their operation, and such operation may be negatively impacted by the shortage in supply. And if their produce cannot be transported to where needed, their capacity will also be adversely impacted. So we must ensure the smooth running of the entire chain. For example, the key raw materials and expedient materials must be on the list of awaiting transportation. No blockage should be set up against the transportation of these key supply resources, including the raw materials. And next, we should give proper guidance to businesses on their daily disinfection and ventilation in workplaces, reduce the density of workers. It is worthy of special mentioning that in areas where there is a very severe epidemic challenge, the priority is still on epidemic curbing. And we should orderly and step by step have the incremental measure for restoring business. Mr. Wang from Ministry of Commerce, in the past years, we've noticed that the smaller businesses will give a longer Spring Festival break. The supply of daily necessities were dependent on the large-scale franchised operations. The smaller businesses usually resumed their business operation around the Lenten Festival, but this year is different. Impacted by the epidemic, there are problems of understaffing and undersupply. Restoration of business has been slower than previous years. For 95% of the outlets of franchised supermarkets have restored business, and the shopping malls, 35% of the shopping malls have resumed the business and operation. Vegetable markets, agro-produce markets, which have a close bearing on citizens' life, what we say they are the capillary of people's life, and they are much slower in their business resumption compared with the previous years. Currently, our priority is still in reining in the epidemic. Such markets are where there is a high density of people. When people are going back to their workplaces, there is a much higher need for daily necessities. There is an urgency. and imperativeness to restore the business operations, the State Council and the central government pay great attention to the issue. President Xi Jinping suggested that manufacturing, production, and the daily life of people should be maintained its normal order, as well as we are ensuring the reining in of the epidemic. So as commented by Premier Li Keqiang.
For the Ministry of Commerce, our overall thinking is that while ensuring the epidemic control, we need to offer more guidance to the localities and provide well-targeted measures and efforts, specifically for areas with a severe epidemic situation. The enterprises producing the daily necessities will be restored to operation, and for localities with not severe epidemic situation, will have a phase-by-phase expansion of the enterprise operation. Actually, on February the 1st, the Ministry of Commerce worked out a guidance to the local authorities, guiding them to provide facilitating conditions for the resumption of the work and production. We have already worked out the initiative to resume production and stabilize the price. Many stores have responded actively to this initiative. Secondly, together with the National Health Commission, we worked out a circular helping the local enterprises to have strong measures against the epidemic. We have also worked out the guidance or guidelines for the catering sector, informing the restaurants the features of the epidemic and encouraging the restaurants to adopt appropriate measures like body temperature taking and the various standards of practice. Thirdly, ensuring the back to work of the enterprises. We have worked with the relevant companies and authorities to ensure the supply of the protective materials and disinfection liquids to the frontline production companies. For the next step, we also call on the local authorities to offer more guidance to the companies so that they can resume their production, and the relevant agencies like public security and transportation authorities are also encouraged to offer more support. Next question. The journalist on the second row. Thank you. From Dragon TV. Recently, it was reported that the fresh leaf vegetables are quite expensive. So my question is how to address the supply and demand gap, and also when the supply is not adequate, what to do? Okay, Mr. Chen and Mr. Yang are going to answer your question. First, Mr. Chen, in order to ensure the supply of the vegetables, NDRC, together with the competent authorities, the local authorities, have strengthened the matching between the supply and the demand. We guided the local governments, like the city governments, to organize the local major sellers of the vegetables to get in contact with the vegetable producers and ensure the supply of the vegetables in the markets. We've already had some effective measures or practices. For example, in Beijing, as you all know, the Xinfadi, the wholesale market, is a very influential market for vegetable and the food supply. And this wholesale market has already contacted the suppliers and increased the ordering. Secondly, we have suggested the relevant markets to increase the stocks. Also, the neighboring producers are informed and reminded to get ready, and in case of necessity, they can send vegetables and daily necessities to the localities in need. So, just as Mr. Wang from the Ministry of Commerce has mentioned, NDRC and the Ministry of Commerce have guided the local authorities to stabilize the prices and have already initiated a call on stabilizing the price. Such initiative has already covered the major cities, ensuring the adequate supply. Thirdly, to make use of the local reserves. Reserves are established to adjust the supply and demand. So, in the major cities in the north, we urge them to improve their stockpiling system and appropriately expand the scale of and the volume of stockpiling. Once they spot any market shortage, they should take quick actions to utilize this reserve, ensuring the constant supply of the daily necessities. This system has already been established for several years. According to our data, there are more than 40 cities engaged in this system, and altogether they have reserved more than 300,000 tons of vegetable. Thank you. Mr. Yang, please. Well, for this question, there's also some discussion online, and this is also what we have observed. For the fresh leaf vegetable shortage, I think there are 3 reasons. The first is the fresh leaf vegetable is a seasonal vegetable. Indeed, in winter, it is of a lower production volume compared with the spring and the summer seasons. And the second, for fresh leaf vegetables, the transportation distance is shorter. So for the major cities, they usually get the fresh leaf vegetables from the neighboring counties. And another reason is that the short shelf life of the fresh leaf vegetables. In some localities affected by the epidemic, there is not enough human resources to procure the fresh leaf vegetable and to transport them to the cities.
So to address the issues, we propose the following 3 measures. First, We collaborate with the rural authorities to organize better harvesting of the vegetables and ensure the supply of these fresh leaf vegetables. Since the start of the Spring Festival, the plantage acreage was 2.28 million mu, as 1 mu is 0.07 acre. We will also ensure a proximity allocation of the fresh leaves. In Wuhan City, for each mu, there is 100 RMB invested in the plantage of the faster growing fresh leaves, and altogether an acreage of 300,000 mu of faster growing fresh leaf vegetables has been planted. And third, technical guidance should be provided to facilitate plantation. As we are moving into the spring season, there will be a much faster growth of the fresh leaves. Information technology should also be leveraged to ensure the supply of fresh leaves, and we believe incremental measures will help to address the issue. Next question, please. The second row, journalist in white. Thank you. I'm from the Agriculture Market newspaper. We know that because of the transportation suspension, there has been some major shortage of supply for the feed of animals. And some of the chickens have to be buried because they are not supplied with enough feed. How can we ensure the supply of feed and prevent epidemic among the household animals? I'd like to ask Mr. Kong from the Animal Husbandry and Veterinary Department to take the question. This is a question of common concern because of the shortage of feed in Wuhan City. We've organized the restoration of manufacturers to deal with the shortage of feed supply. The incremental measures have gradually solved the issue, and the state-owned food companies has allocated 150 million tons of feed to Hubei province. The National Grain Center has provided Hubei with 150 million tons of corn and soybean residues. 808 million tons of the soybean residues are also provided to Hubei province. For the next steps, we'll continue our attention to the feed supply in Hubei province, organize the allocation of raw materials, improve the transportation capacity, so as to ensure the stable running of the animal husbandry industry in Hubei. If we look at the results from the last Friday allocation of resources, because of the guidance from the relevant departments, these have effectively helped the restoration of production by major feed suppliers. If we look at the national condition, 65% of the feed suppliers have restored their business. Guangdong, Shandong, Hunan provinces' restoration of business was above 70%, and for some big franchised operations, 90% of their capacity has been restored. Localities have been organizing the restoration of business operation and the supply transportation. Hotline is received questions and problems regarding the irrational supply in certain localities, and we are addressing them one by one. We believe that for the animal husbandry in winter and in Spring Festival, it is of great importance to ensure there is no animal epidemic. So this is the priority season for us. We are on high alert to any potential outbreak. We have a stringent accountability system, and we have asked the improvement of screening and the addressing of any urgency, and to curb and rein in the spreading, if any. In general, animal epidemic across the country is not a problem across the country. A journalist on the second row. I'm from Economic Daily News. As people are going back to workplaces, there is a surge in the demand of masks. Despite of the restoration of manufacturing, it's still difficult for the general public to get a mask. When will the problem be finally addressed? I'd like to ask Mr. Chen from NDRC to take the question. After the outbreak of the epidemic, there has been an increasing demand of masks. Under the Joint Prevention Control Mechanism, NDRC has been collaborating with ministries and relevant and tried all means to improve manufacturing capacity. We've adopted a combination of measures in the following 3 key areas. First, we rapidly organized enterprises to restore their business operation. Production is the priority in the restoration of supply. We have a proper and adequate understanding of the daily capacity, and we rapidly organized the restoration of mask manufacturers, ensured the raw material supply to these mask manufacturers. We coordinated and facilitated the mask manufacturers to address their difficulties of funding, supply, and the purchase of raw materials, so that the full capacity can be put into operation by 7th of February. 73% of the mask manufacturing capacity has been restored. Surgical mask manufacturing capacity is already 80% of the total. Second, we've supported the manufacturers to expand their capacity and improve the production. Or in other words, we are making bigger pies. We've supported the technological transformation and upgrading of mask manufacturers, and we've allocated resources to some key manufacturers to ensure the manufacturing capacity improvement. Third, we've encouraged importation from multiple channels. We did a fine-toothed combing of the existing importation channels. We've been collaborating relevant departments to facilitate donation without imposing any tariff. We've also been collaborating with foreign governments and international organizations to facilitate the donation of masks, the importation of masks, and their domestic transportation. Chartered flights have been leveraged to import masks. We'd like to advocate, make scientific and sensible use of masks. Masks are used based on the protection needs. Overuse and inappropriate use are not recommended. We should also save the use, make sensible use of the masks by looking up to the technical recommendations. And the journalist on the left on the second row. Thank you. I'm from people.cn. We know that the rural areas is the priority for epidemic prevention. Soon it will be the spring farming time. Will the epidemic put a dent on the farming? I'd like to ask Mr. Yang Lisheng from the Farming Department of Ministry of Agriculture to take the question. Yes, as you have rightly pointed out, that moving into spring, the year's planning and deployment will start. Time waits for no man. It is particularly true in the agriculture aspect. In general, the spring farming for this year is positive. There are already some winter plants that are in the field, like wheat and the oilseed vegetables along the Yangtze River. It has been a warm winter, and there has been plenty snow and rain.
So it is really favorable for plowing. And our data shows that this year's plowing has been increased and improved than the previous year. So laying a solid basis for this year's harvest of wheat. For varieties waiting to be plowed or getting prepared to be plowed, it is fair to say that early preparation has been in place. The seeds and the fertilizers are in adequate supply. For the south, for the early paddy rice, the conditions have already been in place, while in the north, the conditions are being prepared for plowing. The price has been stable. It is expected that during the spring plowing season, the farming machineries are in place. So we enjoy a favorable condition in terms of the preparation for plowing. The Ministry of Agriculture and the Rural Areas is earnestly following the guidance from the central government and making every effort to get the spring plowing ready. We've already had a televised meeting requiring the localities to get ready for to have a sound spring production while fighting against the epidemic. We also ask the local authorities to ensure the successful start of the spring plowing, making the conditions ready and available. The experts can offer online guidance. Hotlines are set up to answer questions, and field management has been conducted while all the plowing preparation is in place. Also, sound field management for tea leaves and fruits. Coming back to your question, to put it simple, yes, the epidemic has some impact on farming, but the overall situation is under our control, and we are confident that with the guidance from the central government, this year we will have another harvest. Thank you. Next question. The journalist in black. Thank you. I'm from Changjiang Daily. We understand that in order to ensure the adequate supply of daily necessities in Wuhan, some authorities have already set up a joint mechanism among 9 provinces and cities. Could you please elaborate on this mechanism and what its role to ensure the supply of daily necessities in Wuhan? Mr. Wang, you can take the question. Yes. As you all know, on January the 23rd, the Wuhan lockdown was initiated. Afterwards, there was a panic shopping among the local people in many supermarkets. You can find empty shelves for staple food and instant noodles in the supermarkets. The government has immediately set up the coordination mechanism involving the 9 provinces, and we have already had a WeChat group which served as a regular mechanism for coordination. So, through the internet, the officials in charge are in close coordination. With this mechanism, we can be informed the supply of the daily necessities in Wuhan and immediately coordinate the supply and demand, ensuring the adequate supply of daily necessities in Wuhan. The NDRC, Ministry of Transportation, and Ministry of Agriculture and the Rural Areas, as well as other relevant authorities, are all engaged in this mechanism. By now, for Wuhan, the more than 7,000 tons of daily necessities are insured with this mechanism. For vegetable, more than 6,000. And for the instant and convenience food, also a large sum. Also with this mechanism, the shortage of daily necessities in Wuhan is addressed. I'd like to take this advantage to acknowledge the efforts made by the people in the 8 provinces other than Hubei. Thank you so much. Okay, last 2 questions because of the time constraint. And the journalist on the 3rd row. Thank you. I'm from China Health magazine. I noticed that the nucleic acid test of a patient in China-Japan Friendship Hospital has the false negative result. So will this lead to underreporting, and will this lead to more spread of the epidemic? Today we also have with us Dr. Gao from Renmin Hospital. Dr. Gao, you may take the question. Microphone, please. Well, for any nucleic acid test on virus, the testing result can hardly be 100% positive. For the NCP, the novel coronavirus pneumonia, this is not an exception. There could be false negative result. This is inevitable. Also, for the testing results, there are many variables like the progression of the disease, the sampling approach, and the testing facilities in the laboratories. So there are a lot of variables. For the confirmed NCP cases, the nucleic acid test is an essential and necessary step. If the result is positive, we can confirm the case. If the first test result is negative, Yet it is a suspect case. So following the existing diagnosis and the treatment protocol,
the listed hospital is still to quarantine the patient and observe it. Thank you, Director Gao, for taking the question. The last question for today. Journalist on the first row. I'm from CNR, CCTV. We know that the African flu, swine flu, hasn't been curbed completely. And now there is the double challenge from this epidemic. Previously, there has been the stockpiling of protective masks and garments. Are the existing masks and garments for the protection against the swine flu be allocated for the use of this fight? The supply and the price of pork has been the concern of the entire society. If we look at the prevention control situation against swine flu in 2019, there has been 63 cases across the world, and 390,000 animals have been slaughtered. Starting from the 24th of December, there is no new case of swine flu. According to our sample statistics, the biosafety awareness of the animal husbandry households have been improved. The transportation and the slaughter contamination has been sharply reduced. Therefore, the risk of swine flu outbreak and spreading has been drastically reduced. However, the past contamination area was high, and we cannot say we have thoroughly eradicated the risk of outbreak and spreading. Therefore, we should be continuously on alert for the potential risks. Starting from last year, the production on a month-over-month increase has increased 7%. During the Spring Festival, the production has been stable, and there is no drastic increase in the pork price. And with the outbreak of the NCP, there is no double adverse impact on the swine flu prevention. However, there has been the shortage in feed supply, and some animal husbandry households say that they are also understaffed. Because of the national condition of late restoration, some of the farms cannot restart operation according to the original schedule. And because of the quarantine and lockdown measures in certain cities, there have been some slight increase in the price of pork in certain handful of cities. And some consumers are concerned about the safety in the consumption of poultry and eggs that further led to the increase of pork price. We are collaborating with relevant departments to ensure the stable order of production, and we have a dual emphasis on the prevention against the potential risk from swine flu and the curbing of the NCP. We step up our efforts, improve the production capacity to minimize the potential impact from NCP. By the end of this year, we plan to restore the pork production capacity to that of the previous years. Your second part of the question is on the holistic utilization of the resources, in particular the resources for animal husbandry quarantine. Most of these supplies are not in existing inventory. we have to make urgent procurement from manufacturers. Ministry of Agriculture has established an emergency response mechanism with the quarantine department in different localities. It is usually for emergency reallocation of this inventory. So the stockpiling is not high, but once there is an outbreak or an emergency need, there will be holistic allocation from this inventory to support the frontline need. Just like the popular saying online, we are continuously on the move, and it is very dynamic response to the allocation of resources needs. We have allocated 240,000 protective garments and 5.9 million of N95 respiratory masks, disinfection medicines, 943 tons, and disinfection vehicles, facilities, over 1,000 units. So most of these existing inventory for swine flu have been reallocated under the Joint Prevention Control Mechanism. With that, we've completed the questions from the floor. We'd like to ask Mr. Fondue Zhao from the CDC to give us some briefing on health know-hows. I'd like to answer some of the most frequently asked questions. There is the online saying that the NCPs can be transmitted via aerosols. And how should we define it? Will it influence our frequency of ventilation? The most important transmission pathway is droplet transmission for the close distance and also the contacts. Fecal oral transmission and aerosol transmission are yet to be confirmed. Epidemiological survey has shown that most cases can be tracked to a close contact history, which has reconfirmed the droplet and contact transmission. What is aerosol transmission? During the suspension of droplets in the air, because of the loss of water, the pathogen will form a nuclei with the protein. And this nuclei can be suspended and transmitted along the air to a longer distance. In a specific environment, aerosol transmission is possible. For example, if it is incubation, clinical surgical operations, this may happen. However, there is no evidence to show that CMP is transmitted in an aerosol pattern. Then does the air carry an NCP virus? Should we more frequently ventilate our rooms? NCP is most importantly transmitted through droplets, coughing, sneezing, or short distance talking 1 to 2 meters, and the virus cannot suspend in the air and float in the air for longer distance or for a longer time. So what we advocate is that when we cough and sneeze, we should use tissue paper handkerchiefs, or even if you don't have that any, then you use your elbow. Turn around to avoid facing others directly, thus promoting the droplets transmission. We also emphasize that when we talk with others, 1 meter is the Cordon safe line. So in a normally ventilated room in air, it does not carry novel coronavirus particles, but still we advocate 1 to 2 times open window ventilation, but during winter time, be kept warm when you open the window for ventilation. Wearing masks is effective and sufficient enough to prevent against droplet transmission. we don't have to be panic over this issue. The second most frequently asked question is during the transmission of the animal husbandry products and agricultural produce, will there be attachment of the virus, and how should we deal with these agricultural produce? If the droplets there is a small likelihood of direct contacting from the droplets on vegetables or meat. But still, we advocate washing the vegetables and meat with running water. Some are asking if we could store them for more days.
We still suggest that fruit and vegetables should be kept fresh. Otherwise, they will get bad and be detrimental to health. And also, please remember not to have raw food. For fruits, peel off the skin and also separate the utensils. Furthermore, the virus can be killed by the high temperature. So preparing the food with the frying or stoving can get rid of or can cure the virus. Also, for the fecal mouse transmission at the moment, we don't have the evidence yet. But if you take the cooked food, you can be prevented from such risks. Also, netizens are very interested in the disinfection in the living environment. There's some panic. The virus is sensitive to ultraviolet and also to the common disinfectants. So you can use the common disinfectants to eliminate the virus. Some places are spraying the disinfectants on the tires of the cars. That's not necessary. This is an overreaction. We need to follow the standards and pay attention to the potential risks. Thank you very much, Dr. Feng. So Dr. Feng has given us some knowledge, health knowledge, and there is a dedicated web page on our website about the NCP. You are more than welcome to watch the web page. So that's all for today, and tomorrow's press conference will focus on the epidemic prevention control measures at the community level. Hope you will continue to follow us. That's all for today's press conference. Thank you very much.